let's go back to the example of the butterfly. So if you take that example and translate it to yourself, your outcome, which is where you are today, is the result of actions, thoughts, emotions, feelings that started many years ago. Sometimes it is difficult for you to see the beginning. All you see is right where you are right now. And because of that, it's hard for you to really be spontaneous. You can't be spontaneous. You can't be spontaneous when you are suffering from pain and a feeling of constraint. But you need to understand that the constraint that you're experiencing, you had a hand in it. That's what I'm trying to get across. Now, there are situations where you can clearly see how you had a hand in it. But in many situations, you cannot see how you could have had a hand in it. Okay, so let's say if you were in a bad marriage, let's say, you could see that, well, you made the decision to marry. If we're according to the last workshop we did, we talked about the fact that women find themselves in a very, very difficult situation. And we were able to trace back, going way, way back, to see how we could have had a hand in why we are where we are today. Correct? Yeah. So if you can begin to say to yourself, I don't know when or how I had a hand in what's going on with me now, but starting from this moment, I am going to start living my life in such a way that my next moments and my future moments will be guaranteed to be free. Does that make sense, what I just said? Okay. It doesn't mean that the current moment is going to just disappear. But we know that life goes on. The sun's going to shine tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after. So even though today there's a cloud over the sun, tomorrow the only way a cloud will be over that sun will be because yesterday you didn't pay attention, and whatever you were doing, thinking, feeling, or saying was building a thread that would create a cloud over tomorrow.
I was just wondering, when you say that we had a hand in it, I understand that, and I know there's no fault attached to that, in terms of we create the vibrations or acts that end up happening to us in our lives, and that we have a hand in that, in the way that react. I'm just wondering though, when people have deep trauma or things that have happened to them in their lives, and that they can't identify or control the way that they react, and send their energy out there in that way, and don't know, I'm just wondering if you can address that.
Just real quick, in the blaming, you listed a few things, but I also wonder about the way we blame ourselves as part of that burden.
Yes.
Do we carry?
So the questions are, what when somebody has had a deep trauma and they're they're reacting and dealing with this trauma, and they don't know how to get out of it. You talked about when we're in situations where we're self-blaming. Well, both situations are situations where a guaranteed path out of being trapped in that kind of pain requires an openness to exploring and gaining knowledge and insight as to why what is happening is happening. Okay, so let me give a hypothetical situation or hypothetical example. You know, a lot of times a person, let's say a person is suffering from chronic anxiety and depression, and they have no idea where that came from. It is impossible for them to find the basis of their anxiety just by looking at their current life situation. In many instances, their anxiety and their depression in therapy is traced back to their childhood. But that happens simply because both we, the client, and the therapist have only a limited view of the whole picture. That is the reason. And in fact, the whole picture goes way beyond one limited earth life. And if you're not able to consider and face up to the fact that your existence extends far beyond just this life that you're living or experiencing right now, then it is not possible for you to see what lies way behind you. And if you're unable to even acknowledge what lies way behind you, then it's going to be almost impossible for you to anticipate what lies ahead of you or what is to come. For that reason, let's just say, let's take another hypothetical example. We see a lot, we look at back at history, and we know that a lot of people suffered tremendously during the world wars, let's say. People whose families were torn from their arms. A lot of people suffered during the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition. A lot of Jews suffered in the Second World War. And also think of all the people who were sold into slavery or born into slavery simply because they were dark-skinned. A lot of people suffered in Russia during the communist revolution, and so on and so forth. We think of them as, masses of people, but in fact, they were individual human beings. And for each individual human being, all that matters to that individual human being is his or her personal experience. And that individual human being takes his or her personal experience with him or with herself from that life into the next life. And so people, they have deep emotional scars that have come from that terrible experience. And they carry it with them and they bring it into their next life. In the same way, when a person is feeling remorse about something, a deep personal remorse, that remorse is like it's like a thread or a chain that holds them down. And they carry that remorse with them everywhere they go. Even though they don't remember what it is that brought about the remorse. But it's important for us to understand that many things that are going on in our lives right now are related to things that have occurred in our past. It could be it could be a year ago, it could be 10 years ago, it could be 50 years ago, meaning it's not always just in your childhood, but it can also be even in your previous life. Now, why is it important to be aware of these things? It's important for a number of reasons. The first reason is that once you become more conscious of this, then there something inside you clicks, drives you to want to disengage from the past so that you can move into your future. But how can you disengage from the past? Everything that comes from you is like a little thread. Think of a spider's web. The thread of a spider's web. I was reading in National Geographic. A spider's web is so strong. Imagine that there is a thread that comes from you that is so thin, it's thinner than a hair. It is invisible and it is unbreakable. unbreakable. Every experience, every thought, every action creates a thread. And this thread, depending on the content of the action, the emotion, the thought, will sort of encompass you and create a big circle that comes back and attaches to you. It starts out attached to you. It goes out and it comes back and it's attached to you. Now, if you are creating, we are all creating threads constantly. When these threads are threads that are directed in an upward manner, meaning you are longing to become free of all the pernicious emotions and thoughts and actions and words, then these threads go upwards and sort of anchor you upwards. When you engage in pernicious emotions, desires, then these threads are gonna go downwards and anchor you downwards, because they act as the chain that attaches to an anchor on a boat. That's exactly the way these threads function. Now, sometimes we find ourselves, because we're constantly producing threads, if your threads are all convoluted, some are going up, some are going down, some are going sideways, then you're trapped in a web of threads. Don't take this too lightly, what I'm saying, because that is the case with every single one of us today. We are all trapped in a web of threads that we ourselves built. And I'm not talking about the society. I'm not talking about women in the society. I'm talking about individual human beings. When you think about yourself, you only can think of yourself as an individual human being. That doesn't include your husband, your children, your parents, your friends, your boyfriend, or anybody else. And we have to start understanding ourselves as individual human beings. So, a human being or human spirit cannot be a free spirit until it is able to disentangle itself from the web that it has created over many lifetimes. And to disentangle oneself, the threads can only be untied one by one. You know, it's like if you have a tangle of wool, and you want to disentangle the yarn. You have yarn and it's all tangled up and you want to disentangle it. you have to pull the threads one at a time. You can't do it any other way. So in the same way, when you're going through your experiences in life, be aware that each experience is an opportunity for you to untangle one thread, and be aware that there's still a tangle of threads still waiting for you to untangle them. If you can allow yourself to understand that, then you can begin to do the work that the pupa has to do, because the pupa is actually wrapped in this casing that consists of threads. You know, has anybody actually studied, you know, the process of metamorphosis? You probably studied it in high school. You know, the caterpillar has to weave these threads. You know, let's try this. Okay, you know how silk is made, right? How is silk made?
From a silkworm.
Right. What's a silkworm? A silkworm is really a caterpillar, right? And the silkworm turns into a moth, right? Which is the same thing as a butterfly, right? And we know that silk is the strongest fiber. It's the strongest natural fiber there is. That's why ships in the old days built their sails out of silk. So why does the silkworm produce the silk? Do you know how they get the silk? No. Okay. The silkworm, which is a caterpillar, produces this fiber that is intended to, it winds itself around and around and around and around and around and around and around in it. And that's what it uses to create the pupa. So the caterpillar produces a silk, and this silk is wound around the caterpillar and creates a very firm case around the caterpillar. In order to get out of it, it would have to unwind itself all over again. Of course, we intervene as human beings. We as soon as the caterpillar starts producing the fiber, the silk, we take the silk, we kind of keep pulling it away from it, and it keeps producing, and we keep pulling it away. But it's important for you to understand that this thread that you're producing is literally unbreakable. You have to unwind it. And the unwinding is the experience that you're going through. Do you get it? So no matter how difficult or painful the experience you're in at the moment, think of it as an unwinding. That's number one. Number two, think of it as an experience that helps you or teaches you to not create any threads that will result in a similar need to unwind it. Once you begin to learn that, then your choices, your thoughts, your emotions especially, will be such that you will not want to create any new such threads for yourself. Now, remember, I'm not validating or invalidating potential feelings like, well, some other outside force also is contributing to my pain. Okay? That doesn't invalidate your feeling that that others outside of yourself have something to do with why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. True, they do. But your job is to disengage from all pernicious threads. So when you are in a painful situation and there are outside forces or individuals also contributing to your painful situation, however you're responding, be aware that you're producing a thread as you respond. And however those threads manifest will attach you even more to the unpleasant or negative relationship and tie you down even more. And you will still have to undo that thread. So basically, what I'm saying is, once you become aware of that, you start to pay attention to how you are responding to a situation, okay, to your life, to the things around you, to the people around you, and try to think, I only want peace and joy in my life. Then you're going to have to respond with peacefulness to others who may be causing you, pain and difficulties. You want to begin to teach yourself to think, I want only love to come back to me. So I'm going to only put out love, even in situations where others are not necessarily directing love towards you. It's not easy to do. But when you start, you start one day at a time to do that. And the more you do that, the old threads are still going to find their way back. You're still going to have to live through the consequences of the old threads, because the threads are not going to go anywhere until they come back to you and you live through them. But the more you start to put out purer threads and threads of light and love and truthfulness, then the old threads kind of fall away by themselves. Now, I'm going to say something to you that I think will bring you back to the workshop we did the last time in September. As we all are, we're all human spirits living in creation. At the last workshop, we talked about helpers. Here on earth, we help one another. People who are a little bit more experienced help others who are not as experienced as themselves in whatever area they are experienced, right? And we turn to others to help us, siblings, family, mentors. In the same way, spiritually, we can turn to higher beings or higher beings. Yes, we can turn to them for help. But we also receive help from other human spirits who are closer to us and are able to encourage us and help us because they have been where we are at the moment. Not because they stand much higher, but they stand right next to us, like just as a half step higher than us. And they've gotten to that half step because they have managed to understand that they have to let go of all the things that we cling to that cause us pain. Because in fact, the things that cause us pain only cause us pain because we're hanging on to them. We have to delicately, like with tweezers, disentangle ourselves from it. As long as we do not disentangle ourselves, we are clinging to it. Now, how do we ask for help? We can ask for invisible help, and we can ask for visible help. But it's important for us to know that help comes to you when you ask for it, but it only is going to be effective when you use it. If you don't use it, it doesn't do you any good. You can only use it when you actually make yourself aware of it.